Lenois back with you for hour number 3 of the Green Mountain Mornings program at 15 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on this Tuesday, August the 22nd. Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer here in the studio with me. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
And we also have BCTV here to document our conversation with members of the local media. We appreciate Brattleboro Savings and Loan for their financial support of this partnership with Brattleboro Community Television. They are an ultra-local programming sponsor of BCTV live events, municipal meetings, and these Green Mountain Mornings Tonight segments, as they get called, on Brattleboro Community Television. Starting off this morning, Chris, with a follow-up story you had in this morning's Reformer, as well as online at reformer.com, about a civil trial over not the entire West River Trail, as I understand, but just a portion of it. That there's a man, Melvin Mayo, who claims he has ownership of it. This goes back to last week as well, was kind of part one of the trial. You had a story about that on Friday. Yeah. If people aren't familiar, let's just kind of give them a sense of what the issue at hand is here.
Well, Melvin Mayo has put up a fence on his property since a judge ruled in June, saying that, that basically that he only owns a certain part of the land, but he interprets that as land owned by him, and he can block it off. The Friends of the West River Trail, a nonprofit group, they believe that they own part of the land that the trail goes through.
And this is one of the entry points of the trail, not the only one, like people who park at the marina and walk in from that direction.
Yeah, people are encouraged to use that point for now, yeah.
That one is safe right now, but a lot of people evidently in the past have used this part. And last week, the judge wasn't necessarily, I guess if you're not completely familiar with that trail, and I'm certainly not in terms of being able to read, when he talks about it, sounds like portion of it is owned by the Friends of the West River Trail, or accessible at least by the Friends of the West River Trail, and a portion of the land at issue is owned by Melvin Mayo. So last week it sounded like he had kind of granted a partial access to people who wanted to use the trail, members of the public.
Well, that's what this trial was all about, basically.
Right, and so now we fast forward to yesterday, right?
Yeah, it's basically saying whether the public will have the right to access that. That's what the judge is going to be deciding.
Now, before we get into some of the back and forth on this yesterday, the reason that this is in contention is because apparently the tax map for the town of Dummerston is messed up.
Yeah, that's one thing that the Friends of the West River Trail have brought up with the judge.
Oh, so that's not necessarily the case. That's just what one side is alleging.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm like, this could just be cleared up if Dummerston just agrees to redo their tax map and come to an issue rather than the he said, she said that we read about in your story from yesterday's trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we'll put that aside for now and say, maybe the town could step in.
Well, I guess that's not a rare thing. What they were saying that it's often found in these towns' tax maps that there's some issues with the boundaries and all.
Yeah. Now, the trial that took place yesterday, at the end of it, Judge Valenti did not render a decision.
No.
What's he going to do?
He's giving them about 3 weeks, both sides, to submit. Basically, he described it as closing arguments. Melvin Mayo isn't a trained attorney. He said that to me. He said, "Oh, this is my first and last time doing this, hopefully." But he was the one who was questioning all the witnesses and the experts and all. So the judge is giving him some extra time to review all the testimony and exhibits and then submit his written closing argument. And the West River Trail groups, they have the same amount of time to submit something, and they were represented by Paul Gillies. He's a well-known attorney.
Yes, he is. And so no more testimony in open court at this point. It's a matter of them submitting their closing arguments, and then Judge Valenti is going to render his decision.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that he said, hey, if you guys come to a solution before I do, by all means, because you've seen all the evidence, you've heard all the testimony. So if you guys can come up with something on your own, go for it.
And it sounds like Mr. Mayo, more so from your article on Friday, is willing to grant the public some access to the trail. He said that's his intention. He just doesn't trust the Friends of West River Trail.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because he feels, I don't want to speak for him, but from what I understand, he feels like they're claiming ownership of his land, and they have been, and they haven't really. He feels like they haven't really come to him with requests to use his land, and so he says he's open to letting people use the trail, like his neighbors who spoke in court yesterday, but he doesn't want it to be based with the Friends of West River Trail group.
Right. Well, now, and he has property deeds, I presume, that show he purchased these parcels of land that he feels includes this particular trailhead along the West River Trail. Why does the Friends of the West River Trail feel they have ownership of this? Or what proof do they use?
Well, they purchased a 20-acre parcel of land, and at the time they thought they were buying an easement for the railroad, but their attorney apparently told them that they bought this rail bed back there, so they feel like they own 2 acres of a 4-acre parcel that Mr. Mayo thinks he owns.
Right. So they both have some documentation showing that they presumably own the same parcel of land.
Yeah.
And that's really why this needed to go to court. Now, when Mr. Mayo talks about not trusting the Friends of the West River Trail, some of the testimony they gave in court yesterday under his queries to me indicated why. It seems to me that they're not respecting this no trespassing signs right now that he's posted from some of the testimony. Was that your take on it as well?
Well, to be fair to the Friends group, they felt like it was their property. They had access. The public had the right to access it, even
though there's a no trespassing sign there.
Well, that's what they're in dispute about. So
right. And Mr. Mayo claims they've never approached him to discuss this with him. Is that their contention as well? Have they, do they say they've tried to approach him and talk to him about it?
Yeah, both sides were kind of saying the opposite.
Right.
Or the same, depending how you look at it.
I mean, when you hear somebody like Julia Chase saying that her understanding about these no trespassing signs is that they come and go over the years. And people talk about, even prior to Mr. Mayo owning this land at different times, whether it was posted or not, ignoring no trespassing signs. Just because you've always done it doesn't necessarily make it legal to do.
Yeah, I tried to recall some of my days using trails as a kid, and I don't remember really disobeying no trespass signs. But if they felt that they had this right, if they had this access, I don't know. But
I'm not referring to, using the trail since 2002 and would occasionally see no trespassing signs. Mr. Mayo hasn't owned the land since 2002. He bought it relatively recently, I thought.
Yeah, I forget the exact year.
Right. This has been different owners at different times, and people who use that trail have been using it regardless of what's posted and what's not posted. So they have a history, they being people who use the trail, not necessarily the Friends of West River Trail, but people who use the trail have a history of ignoring these no trespassing signs even prior to a complaint filed by Mr. Mayo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where this ends up. But again, Dummerston could just clear this up by realigning their tax map.
I don't know.
Okay. Anything else you want to add about this before we go to break as far as this particular civil dispute?
No, I was able to see the eclipse yesterday during one of the breaks, so that was cool.
That helped. Certainly good stuff there with the eclipse. We'll talk about that with Chris as well as other stories he's covered for The Reformer, both in the pages of the print edition and online at reformer.com when we come back after the bottom of the hour news break. 66 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois, and our conversation with Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer. You mentioned getting out during the civil trial yesterday between the folks of the Friends of West River Trail and Melvin Mayo to watch the eclipse a little bit. Did you have the special goggles, or did you have to concoct some sort of camera obscura?
Well, when I got there to the court in the morning, I bumped into the court clerk, and he said, "Oh, did you bring your glasses?" And I said, "I don't have any." And I asked him if he had his, and he said yes. So when we went on break, the afternoon break just before the end of the day, it was about that time. So I ran outside and I found him, and he was out there with his glasses, so I borrowed them.
So he let you use them. It's good to have those connections when you're a member of the media, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went all around on Saturday looking for those glasses, sold out from the different stores. The guy down at Positive Geek on Flat Street had bought 250 pairs. He said he sold out like that.
Wow.
And Walmart, too, over in Hinsdale, they apparently had glasses at some point. They sold out by Thursday of that week. It would be, I don't know how many were bought up in this area, but it was pretty hard to find.
Yeah, I was at that Walmart on Friday, and I didn't see any. So.
Right. No, they said they didn't have them anymore there. So I made the old cereal box pinhole thing and, got to see it. It was just weird, right? Just the sky, even if you weren't looking up in the sky, it was just kind of odd. It felt like everything like the sun was on a dimmer switch.
Yeah, it was really cool.
It was pretty cool. Hopefully everybody out there got to safely watch that eclipse yesterday. And hopefully everybody is continuing to stay on top of what's happening in the community with the stories in your hometown daily newspaper, the Brattleboro Reformer. Chris not only covering the Brattleboro area for the Reformer, but also over the Deerfield Valley, and a number of stories in the past week coming from that locality, including the town of Wilmington having a new permanent town manager.
Yeah.
Scott Tucker taking over as town manager by appointment. What do we know about Mr. Tucker?
Well, he comes from the Rutland City Police Department. I think he was there for something like 37 years.
Yeah,
and
long time.
He had different positions, and he also worked with this group called Project Vision, which worked with a bunch of different agencies and organizations in Rutland to come together to make a safer community and work together to find solutions to some of the issues they had with crime.
It sounded to me like it was that sort of interdepartmental experience that he had that probably set him apart in the search. Yeah,
unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to connect the day after. I tried to give him a call, and then we had an outing at work. But yeah, you're right. I think that was it.
Yeah. Do we know much about the search as far as how many people applied or how rigorous the process was? It ended up actually being pretty quick. I mean, Gretchen Haverlucka wasn't interim town manager for all that long of a period of time.
No, it wasn't very long, and they were constantly having interviews. These meetings were warned, executive sessions, and I believe they had something like 60 applicants.
Wow.
They had, so they had a lot of people to choose from.
Yeah, well, it was thorough, and they found somebody who semi-local, being from the Rutland area, not too far from Wilmington there. And I guess you're going to catch up to him at some point and get a little bit more about his background?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if he's going to move to the area or what.
Yeah, well, I would think he would. I don't think he could do it from Rutland. It's a little far in the wintertime to do that, but I guess it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to be continued on Scott Tucker being the Wilmington town manager. That was announced at the select board meeting last Wednesday night, and in the Friday edition of the Brattleboro Reformer, another story coming out of that Wednesday night select board meeting in Wilmington that was in Monday's paper had to do with the Hermitage Club, and an update there from their owner at the time, Jim Barnes, on Wednesday, talking about tax relief. Now, was he asking for tax relief at this meeting?
No, he was. I think he was kind of responding to what's been said in the past about the tax relief, because the town had entered into tax payment plans with the Hermitage.
Right. They owe quite a bit of taxes. Now, some of those, in their defense, are properties they acquired that owed taxes to the town, if I remember correctly.
Right, yeah.
So he was just kind of there explaining why the payments are slower than the town would like?
No, he was explaining basically about some of the issues the company has been facing and why they needed to do the tax payment plan, because with those plans, they're not all the money is going to be paid, that's owed.
In the end, I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Even if they were able to continue these payments for 100 years, not all the money is going to be paid?
Well, yeah, but the agreement is on a lesser amount than what's owed.
Right. Okay. And at the same time, it sounds like decent news for Hermitage Club as far as moving forward now that they have their permits in place. It sounds like they're actually getting their cash flow, getting their investments, starting to see a return on this.
Yeah, and they're planning to start building a lot more. They're getting other permits in place. They have the big one out of the way, which is the master plan permit. So now they're getting all these individual construction permits, and at the same time, they're selling real estate because that's what they're hoping to build.
They just sold 5 lots to the tune of $2.6 million. That's pretty impressive for 5 lots that you get that much money from. And you said in September here, they're expecting another $2.5 million in real estate sales. That's what Jim Barnes reported to the Wilmington Select Board. How did they react to this news, to this update? It sounds like it was just kind of a status report from Jim Barnes. What was the Select Board's reaction to it?
Well, he tried to keep it under 10 minutes. It went over by a little bit. No one on the board really had much to say. Ann Manwaring, one of the board members, she asked how this all fits into the downtown and, their vision for working together, I guess, with the town. And Jim said that's, having a vibrant downtown is just as important to them.
Right. Yeah, it didn't sound like this was surprising news to anybody at the Select Board meeting last Wednesday.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, good update there on what's happening over in the Deerfield Valley with the Hermitage Club. Another ski resort over there, Mount Snow, with some good news. I know a long time coming, going back to when I was communications director at Mount Snow over 10 years ago now, when Peak Resorts took it over, and this plan for a bigger water source. Finally, this winter, they're going to have access to more water than they've ever had before.
Yeah.
West Lake Project. Give us some details on this.
Well, it's going to hold 120 million gallons of water. Right now, the body of water they're using, Snow Lake, only can hold 20 million gallons. So this is a six-fold increase.
Yeah. And as far as their snowmaking capacity, what are their goals?
Well, they think they'll be able to open trails faster and have more trails open sooner in the season.
Do they consider this? It almost, reading about it, and you talk about that difference of 20 million gallons to 120 million gallons, as well as their plans to get rid of Snow Lake, that they kind of consider this an endless supply of water. They think this is as much water as they'll ever need in a given ski season.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and right now they're in filling it. Because did they have to get rid of Snow Lake? Was that part of the deal here? And what are they doing with that land?
Well, I think that's still in the planning process, but I think that was always part of the plan.
Right, and they're going to basically they're going to fill it is what it seemed like, right? They're going to basically landscape it.
Yeah, and with this, eventually they're going to be able to get snowmaking to other parts of the mountain that previously didn't have snowmaking.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting, especially because they brought up the fact that the West Lake, they're not going to make it available for recreation during non-skiing months, right? It's not going to be available for boating or anything like that during summer or fall. And I don't know enough about skiers to know if that's common or uncommon. It seems to me that it wouldn't necessarily impact their snowmaking to have recreation on it and let it be something that people could use during the other seasons.
No, I just think there's worry about liability and safety concerns.
That makes sense because they own it, right? And similarly, I applaud the idea of kind of restoring the land there at Snow Lake. But again, it's a beautiful little spot, kind of like right down in the base of Mount Snow below. I forget is it Snow Lake Lodge? That's right above that. It would seem to me that that's an opportunity for 4 seasons recreation there with a body of water. But is that a liability issue as well, you think?
I don't know. I it's probably not great in the winter. Some people might go off the road. There's no barricades or anything.
And I witnessed that a couple of times while I was there. So maybe there is a concern about that aspect of it. But because I've seen it's a skating pond, it's a canoeing pond. I mean, there seems to be no end of things that you could do with a little body of water like that. That I don't know what plans they have once they do landscape it, but it seems to me that it could have been preserved.
Yeah, I don't know how much people use that recreationally.
No, well, they don't at all at this
Yeah.
point because it's a snowmaking pond.
Yeah.
But again, it was if they talk about wanting to be a four-season resort, it would be interesting to know what the conversation was that took place regarding the Snow Lake Pond, excuse me. But now they have the West Lake Pond and are going to hopefully move forward with a successful ski season. Chris Mays, always good to talk to you about this stuff on a Tuesday. Let the listeners know some of the other stories you're working on coming up with your byline.
Yeah, I talked with some officials at Omega Optical about looking at the future with the aging workforce and what they're doing to address that. I'm also talking with a taxi company based out of Swansea who's coming over to Brattleboro to kind of fill the void with Brattleboro taxi closing.
Yeah. I mean, certainly that was a big concern for some people, what to do with Brattleboro taxi closing. So great to hear some people are stepping in to fill that. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to having you in here again in a couple weeks, Chris. Thanks so much.
Good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Reformer.com, the online home for your hometown daily newspaper. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.